All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick in a hotel room in Chicago, getting ready mentally, physically for Bulls Lakers. Drew, I hope the Chicago Wi-Fi goes better for you than it did for me last week. Pretty soon we're going to welcome in Matt Moore of Action Network, otherwise known as at HP Basketball on Twitter. We'll talk about all the NBA awards, and then we'll go through tonight's slate as well. But Drew, how are you? How's Chicago?
It's good, man. I've already seen the sun twice, so I think I got you beat. I saw it yesterday when I got in. It's poking through some cloudy weather right now. But no, the NBA last night was pretty entertaining. I did not find it entertaining that after our show was live, surprise Jimmy Butler goes from not on the injury report to out. That hurt a lot. I don't really know why the Heat felt like they didn't need that game in any way, shape, or form. That team confuses me in terms of their injury strategy generally. And then, tough loss with the Cavs. Also a surprise, Isaac Okoro not going to play tonight. I don't really know how to predict some of these kind of surprise injuries. And even then, Cavs were still live. I thought they got a very good shot for Donovan Mitchell to win that game at the end. And he just didn't have his range really dialed in. But the really entertaining game of the night was absolutely Pelicans Warriors. I don't know if you stayed up for that one, Jay, but what a comeback by the Warriors there. Draymond Green probably should have been ejected in the first half. He gets to play the second half, and he's sort of the emotional cornerstone of that comeback. They basically ran the Pelicans out of the building as Pelicans hit the fatigue wall after the tail end of a very, very trying road trip for them. So that was a pretty fun comeback to be a part of. Having bet on the Warriors, and I got down a little bit more than I should have in the second half of that Warriors game. So I was sweating that one pretty good until they pulled it away in the fourth quarter. But it was a fun night of basketball last night, and I'm really enjoying being back into the groove of kind of daily NBA handicapping. So fired up to talk to Matt here.
Indeed. Yeah. I didn't get to watch a lot of the NBA slate last night because I was in Philadelphia doing a betcast for the Flyers and the Canadians. And let me tell you, Drew, the Flyers hockey is not in a great spot at the moment, although they are on a 5-game winning streak, but it's still not in a great spot. But the betcast was fun with my guy Michael Barkan and the Hall of Famer Al Morganti. So it was fun watching hockey with those guys. But it's not looking great for the Flyers for the foreseeable. Let's go straight into the NBA. Let's welcome in Matt Moore now. And Matt, thank you for joining us. Looking forward to talking about all these awards with you. But let's start with le big one, as they say in Paris, which is about a 3-hour flight from Athens, which is where I want to begin. And that's with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I think Drew and I are much more supportive of his price being a bet than the market is. And the way I'm framing this market at the moment, Matt, is Giannis plays the Celtics tomorrow night on national TV, and then he plays the Sixers on Sunday night. And he's about plus 190 fair to sweep those games. If he does that, do you think he wins MVP?
I don't think he wins it in terms of it's going to be him. I think we're heading into what is going to be an outlier vote. Typically, I've looked at the history of the race, and the winner typically gets about 85% plus of the total points percentage allowed. Like however many points you can get, they get about 85%. I don't think we're going to get that this year. I think this may come down to second place and third place votes. And that's where I think Giannis gets very interesting. I think that what's happening is Jokic is being disqualified by a handful of voters based off of don't want to give him the third-time MVP for various reasons, plus the slide that he had a couple weeks ago. Now Embiid is kind of going through the same thing after missing the game on Monday with an injury, combined with the Sixers' recent slide. So if it just comes down to I can't vote for Jokic and I can't vote for Embiid, it's just got to be Giannis. And I think that there is a lot of Giannis support in the vote that is not reflected in the market. I think that's a much higher percentage. The question is whether it's enough to actually get him home in the point totals that you're going to need to actually win the thing. The best value on the board, I do think, is Giannis, because I do think it's not where he's at in terms of how close he is to winning it. There's been a significant number of voters on record saying he's the best player in basketball. There's a significant number of voters that have said, I think he's the MVP this year. Full admission, I was part of the straw poll that's going to be coming out later this week. Ooh. Giannis is my number one. So there's a lot of these people that are in that kind of camp. I think he has value. It's just going to be a matter of this thing is so tight. It could come down to how these two games go. It could come down to does Embiid play down the stretch? It could come down to does Joker finish and do the Nuggets wind up passing the Sixers in record? They're currently up. This thing is so close. I have never at this point in the season been this lost on who's actually going to win the thing. I've never been in this kind of spot with this award.
I think you make a really good point about the way the voting distribution is going to break this year. Very, very, different type of race than the norm. I agree with you. I don't ever remember being on the eve of April and not knowing pretty clearly who it was going to be. So this is pretty exciting and new. And I do think that sort of the prime time, these big, must-watch games with Giannis against the Celtics and Sixers could absolutely close the gap to where you're talking about a two-man race coming down the home stretch between him and Jokic. And, the second, third place votes are going to matter. You mentioned the straw poll. When would we expect to see that? And what kind of distribution would you expect from, considering that it was taken right on the eve of, Jokic, beating the Embiid-less Sixers? And do you think that, there's going to be a little bit of recency bias built into that isn't ultimately reflected in the voting?
So we're in a tight spot here where, because things are so close, recency bias could wind up being actually the edge here. And on top of it, you've got to consider that, I think, as far as like a recency bias, Embiid had such a huge opportunity on Monday. He had such a huge opportunity. And all he had to do was play. That was really it. Like, even if he had lost, it would have been fine. Even if he didn't have a good game, it would have been fine. But like, I've talked to voters that day were like, I can't believe that an article came out in The Athletic with him basically dropping a diss track on Jokic, and then he doesn't play. Like, that combination does seem to have not sat well with voters. And if you're like, well, should that really determine it? Well, look, if you're a voter and you think that they are neck and neck, if you're like, well, yeah, I've got Embiid slightly, but it's really close. And then that happens and your favor slightly shifts. Now that could be enough to get Jokic back into a number one spot. So I think that will actually wind up having like a pretty significant impact on things. Like Embiid, it's ironic that Embiid's entire case this year has been built on popularity. And he did a very unpopular thing, which could ultimately wind up costing him the award. Like, if you want to make the statistical argument, it's going to be Jokic. If you want to make the winning and overall best player, it's going to be Giannis. Embiid's was more, hey, dominant scorer, let's give it to him, hasn't won it, Joel really wants it, and it feels like he went a little bit too far, and now we're in this spot where it could ultimately wind up costing him the MVP. He's still going to get a huge amount of votes. I think it's an interesting question you asked of, like, the recency, because we've only got 2 weeks left in the season. So is that enough for that recency bias to wear off? If he has a monster game next week, like Wednesday, does that wear Off from a Monday? Like, how long is the recency of bias going to be on this type of thing? Straw poll should be out by the end of this week is what I've been told.
Hey, Jay, I got a quick thought for you. People are going to move Embiid from first to third in the straw poll because of Monday and because of when it was taken. I think that's pretty likely, which means I think the most likely impact that the straw poll will have on the market is it'll flip Embiid and Giannis in terms of price. Do you think that Jokic will have such a disproportionate amount of the support in the poll that he's going to go from plus 100 to minus 200?
I don't think it'll be to that extent. I think the way I see it now, I think with inertia, I would say that Jokic probably wins, just because the thing with this is that had he not won last year, he would be minus 1,000 to win this year. Like, that's the only thing that's keeping him from winning, I think, is that the reluctance to give him a third MVP. And that makes me think that he's going to be top 2 on a significant amount of ballots. And Embiid's case, to Matt's point, has been he doesn't really have a case, because the individual case leans Jokic, the team case leans Giannis. He's a 3 seed against 2 1 seeds. Embiid's case was sympathy and momentum. And he lost all of that on Monday, I think, or at least a big chunk of it. So I think he absolutely needs to beat Giannis on Sunday night in Milwaukee, I think, to be able to flip that and to get that momentum back. I wouldn't put a line through Embiid by any stretch. He's still a huge chance to win MVP, but certainly he's in a lot worse place than he was a few days ago. Let's go to Sixth Man of the Year, which is another race that has seen the odds move pretty dramatically in the past week or so. Emmanuel Quickly at PointsBet is now a minus 225 favorite. That's actually one of the better prices out there. He's minus 275, minus 230 at other spots. Malcolm Brogdon is plus 160, losing last night to the Wizards by 19 and probably costing them the 1 seed, though it's not gone entirely. That certainly didn't help his case. And then Bobby Portis and Malik Monk are the 2 long shots in the market. Matt, what do you make of this one?
I'm mad Norman Powell got hurt. That's my big takeaway. Is I'm just still really mad that Norman Powell got hurt, because Norman Powell to me was the best candidate and he was leading in scoring, which fits with the history of the profile of the award. To me, Quickly feels like the default here. And I think that talking to voters, they've said that there are certain awards that they will prioritize, and six man is one that typically does tend to drop quite a bit down the list. They'll focus on MVP. They'll focus on Rookie of the Year. They'll focus on even Defensive Player of the Year. Sometimes they'll focus more on than six man, even though I think DPOI is harder to assess. And without a great candidate, like Brogdon has been the safe choice. He was in the media poll #1 around midseason. He's been the safe choice of, all right, contributing player, impactful player on a hugely winning team. But the Celtics have slowly dipped. And so a lot of that has kind of gone away. And Quickly's had enough opportunities to start and put up these massive performances like he did this week with the 40 bomb, that you wind up getting this boost to his overall profile. And if it was really close, if it was like there's all these outstanding candidates, well, Quickly really got his points when he started, that might hurt him. But because there's not a really strong candidate, I think that's where Quickly has gained all this momentum. I honestly think that this could be one where we see some random votes thrown in from across. Like we're going to see some like random, like this guy, he got a second, like all those types of things, because there's just not a great candidate this year. Quickly's profile doesn't hit with the history of the award, but I think this is an ahistorical year on a number of fronts. And so I don't necessarily think that this is a market that anybody should be betting into. Is Quickly the most like, is the market reflective of where it's at? Probably pretty close. Could it change? I don't know that there's enough interest or opportunity for it to really shift. So I don't know that there's value for anybody betting into this market right now.
I slightly disagree. I think minus 225 is the wrong price. I think it should be like minus 500, maybe minus 1,000. I'm pretty sure that your kind of key point there was the prioritization of this award, and the fact that as of today, I think a lot of people are just going to be like, okay, fine, it's Quickly, move on. And then, I don't know that changes between now and the end of the season, regardless of what happens, especially as people are focusing on the playoff race, which is super, super interesting. And, of course, the MVP. I personally like I don't love locking up minus 225 for as long as it's going to take to get these awards announced. And the announcing of the NBA awards still drives me absolutely crazy, because it's just absolute guessing game when it happens at random times during the playoffs. But I think it's a nice little odds boost. If any of your kind of, anything you're putting in action for like season long baseball, any kind of season long stuff, you want a little, little boost, parlay it with Quickly 6 man of the year. It looks like a good play to me. Jay, does that strategy check out to you, or you stay away at this point? You're just happy with the position you've got in IQ?
No, I agree. I think he should be closer to minus 1,000. I think we have enough voter sentiment as well. Like yesterday on NBA Today, they did a Emmanuel Quickly 6 man of the year segment where they're talking about it as though the race is done. Kevin O'Connell, Zach Lowe, Chris Herring, they've all spoken publicly about Quickly as the leader for 6 man. So I think that just with the momentum that he has, with the way that Boston have fallen off as well, and Brogdon's edge over Quickly was with the counting stats, and that Brogdon was averaging close to 15 a game and Quickly was averaging 12 a game. The fact that now is condensed to the point where Brogdon's at 14.6 points per game, Quickly's at 14.1. Quickly's got all this momentum, all the stuff that goes beyond the basic counting stats, the on-off, defense, advanced stats, that stuff all points Quickly. And the fact that the Knicks, even though they don't have the momentum they had on the 9-game winning streak, they've still overachieved relative to a Celtics team that is sliding at the moment and just keeps having these random games where they lose to Houston, they lose to Utah, they lose to the Wizards last night by 19, where
not competitive,
everyone with 9 minutes. So I just think the vibes around Boston are bad. Stuff like the Jaylen Brown soundbite the other day, like that stuff all just hurts. So I think that Quickly is the guy, and I agree. I think minus 225 is a bet. Can
I ask you one real more quick question, Jay? So I know your 6 man of the year book is going to be green, at the end of the day. So you're probably not as tilted about this. But how do you feel about the fact that Jordan Poole has finally settled into his 6-man role and is absolutely dominating in that role at long last at the tail end of the season? Is this tilting at all?
Well, let me tell you, I thought the two best bets going into the season were both at plus 600. It was Jordan Poole, 6th man of the year, and Rudy Gobert, defensive player of the year. And let me tell you, those two bets did not work out for me and those two seasons for those two guys. But it's all right. Jordan Poole, God, he is terrifying when he is on. He beat the Sixers by himself on Friday night. Joel Embiid had 46, didn't matter because Jordan Poole just decided he was going to win the game. Very strange season from Poole. No idea what to expect from him. Let's go to Defensive Player of the Year, which I think is a closer race, even though the odds don't necessarily reflect that. Brook Lopez is minus 200 to win. Jaren Jackson is plus 145. Feels like a two-horse race. Would be very surprising to see someone come from the clouds. What's your handicap here, Matt?
I very typically don't make super strong arguments against the market. It's just usually I'm like, well, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. You try and be as good as you can. I have no choice but to plant a flag here. The market's wrong. It's going to be Jaren Jackson Jr. This should be a heavy minus number. I've had voters ask me, why is Brook Lopez the favorite? I've had multiple voters ask me that question. And maybe that sparks them to look into the numbers and be like, well, yeah, I can kind of see it in the games play differential. I get it. Maybe that's the case. But from where I'm at, it's Jaren Jackson Jr. The Grizzlies were middle of the pack defensively. Jaren Jackson returns. They immediately shoot to number one, and they've stayed number one consistently throughout that time in the span where he has played. The counting stats are in his favor. That's not as impactful as it used to be. It's still going to be hugely impactful when you have things like block rate, when it's he has one of the highest block rates of the last 10 years. He's one of the only players to have the stocks numbers of steals plus blocks that he has. He's also, if you want to take it out of the context of the counting stats, Brook Lopez is this elite rim protector. So is Jaren Jackson, but Jaren can switch. And a lot of coaches are going to talk about that. A lot of coaches are going to talk about how, look, in today's NBA, you need a guy that can switch more effectively. So Jaren combines the best of Brook Lopez, which is the rim protection, with the ability to switch. So it just comes down to games played and minutes played. I don't think that Jaren has missed enough time. I think this number is wrong. I think you should be betting Jaren Jackson in a plus number.
It's a compelling case. We've kind of covered the other side of the coin here as to why there's a reason not to vote for JJJ, and it's basically his propensity for fouling and not minutes played is a huge disparity. Brook Lopez has basically played an extra third of a season compared to JJ, but I gotta agree with you. I think the bet right now is Jackson. It's more fun to reward the young guy. It's more fun to kind of spread the awards around. And, Giannis, obviously, once he wins MVP, people are gonna be like, can we really give a second award to the Bucks? No, I'm being a little facetious there. But no, I do think Jackson at plus money is a price. This is probably closer to 50-50. Jay, are you there?
Yeah, I think that this is much closer to a coin flip. I think the case for Brook, as you said, Matt, it's the fact that he's played, I think, almost 600 more minutes than Jaren. The amount of shots that he contests, I think he's contested close to 1,300 shots, and no one else is at 900. That type of stuff. I think as well there is a narrative that's going to hurt Brook that he's got Giannis and Drew next to him. But I think that people don't realize that when Giannis and Drew are off the court and Brook is on, the Bucks have the best defense in the league as well. And I think it's all going to come down to, I think there's no question that per minute Jaren is DPOY. It's just a question of how much voters weigh the fouling and the low minutes against him. And it's not, to me, so much the missed games. It's the fact that he plays 28 minutes a game, largely because he has a serious problem fouling, and how much that impacts voters. And we do have some sentiment out there, with the DPOY ladder, with the article that was in The Athletic with 3 voters talking about DPOY, where Jaren was punished for that. But this market is, I think, very inefficient. This market keeps on moving off of Brook Lopez and Jaren Jackson having 6 block games against bad teams, which should not be the mark of Defensive Player of the Year. So I agree that this is closer to a coin flip. Like, I have a bigger position on Brook Lopez, but I can tell you that, I would not be touching Brook Lopez at minus 200, and Jaren is the better bet at the current prices. Let's talk about most improved player, which is, I think, the most confusing market. Matt, I think last year, Ja Morant closed around minus 2,000, and he ended up winning, but he got 38 out of 100 first place votes. And had there been a more consensus second option, he would have lost, but it was split between DeJounte and Darius Garland and Jordan Poole. I think now it's a two-horse race between Lauri Markkanen, who's minus 450 on PointsBet, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's plus 325. What do you make of this one?
So I was of the opinion up until recently that I was like, I don't understand how it's not going to be Shai. Like, the guy's putting up like numbers that are absolutely bonkers. Like, he's putting up on my straw poll. Like, I had Shai 5th on the MVP straw poll. That's how good Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been. He's been insane. The numbers he's putting up are incredible, and it kind of melds with like the idea of like, well, if Ja won last year, here's a similar candidate. Not as much team success as last year, but a team that's surprisingly competitive for the playoffs. A player that's putting up MVP level numbers, at least to be in the conversation of like, hey, look at the top guys in the league. But I've talked to some voters, and it does sound like Lauri's got a lot more support than I think I expected. I have a early position on Lauri at plus 1,400, so I'm hedged appropriately on this award. If you're betting into it now, I don't think that there's really good value, because I can't feel comfortable that the Thunder are going to make the play-in with a chance to make the playoffs at a high enough probability, especially at the loss to Charlotte last night, for me to feel like that's going to get Shai over, especially with Shai still missing some of these games. Like, that's the real problem here, is like whenever Shai doesn't play, you wind up in these problems of him losing momentum. He plays, he looks amazing. I think some of his momentum gains, and people will be like, God, how is he not the most improved player? He misses a game and then he kind of drifts away, and it's like, oh yeah, it's probably Lauri, just because Lauri's the most improved. Like, a voter said to me this week that, hey, if we're going to define it as like what I thought of the guy before the season, I thought Shai was great, and now he's awesome. I thought Lauri was okay, and now he's awesome. So that's really where I think this gets to. I think that I would not be surprised if Shai winds up winning this award. I still think that Shai's case is very strong for winning the award, and there will be a lot of push to reward Shai. But I do think that I underestimated how much support Lauri already has kind of cemented into the market, with multiple voters being like, yeah, it's Lauri. It's just done.
Yeah, I think that the demarcation was the Thunder clearly being into the play-in mix. He was going to be able to close that gap, but now that looks tenuous at best, I get why there's a bigger gap. And oh, by the way, people have kind of circling the wagons now that Shai is first team All-NBA. And that feels like, okay, well, we can give Lauri most improved. We're going to leave him off of All-NBA. We're going to give Shai first team All-NBA. That's probably more valuable to him from a financial standpoint anyway, the way contracts are priced. So I think he's going to get his via the All-NBA team, which makes sense because, as you mentioned, he's putting up numbers that are in absolutely rare air. And I definitely didn't see it coming. But and also it's funny that like he misses a game and the Thunder are absolutely useless down the stretch offensively. And that just proves what a valuable player he is to the team. And he gets docked for it because the team lost and now they're not going to be in the play-in. So funny how it all kind of comes full circle like that. We haven't really mentioned the other awards just because they, prices don't really look super appealing. But do you think there's any value left in the Coach of the Year or the Rookie of the Year market? Could we see a shock in either of those two where the heavy favorite goes down?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty well wrapped. Coach has been a weird one. I think maybe if the Celtics hadn't had the kind of performances that Jay was talking about, that where they've looked kind of random, they've fallen off. Missoula lost a lot of momentum, I think, in Coach of the Year, and there's just such a strong like positive vibes around the Kings that I think that one's probably locked. Paolo, this feels like the same kind of stuff that we do with the draft, where it's like, it's going to be this guy. And then there's like a week of, but what if it's not? What if it's someone else? And then it's like, oh no, it was the same guy always. It's Paolo Banchero. This has been done for a while. Paolo Banchero looks like a franchise cornerstone superstar. The Magic are competitive. They're not good, but they're competitive. That's a big step up for them. And a lot of that's attributable to Paolo Banchero. I've hit Paolo. I hit him at open. I hit him in every parlay I put in from the beginning of the season. That one's pretty well locked. That one's got no value left in the market. I think both of those races are done.
Yep. we agree there. Jalen Williams had a little kind of fake surge. Jalen Williams isn't going to win Rookie of the Year. And Drew, I don't want to hear any more about you lamenting Mike Brown not being home for Coach of the Year. It's done. It's over. Mike Brown wins Coach of the Year. Your only problem was if Mark Dagenau was going to get a 5 seed, which looked vaguely in play a week ago. That's done now too. So close the book on Coach of the Year. All right, gentlemen, before we talk about the Eastern Conference, baseball season is around the corner, so you can get the Roto World Baseball Draft Guide, get all the player profiles, rankings, and projections you need for your draft. Go to NBCSportsEdge.com/draft guide and use pennant 25 as a code to save 25% checkout. Now, let's start with the East in terms of conference futures. Obviously, the Bucks and the Celtics are heavily anchoring this market, with the Sixers as the clear number 3. And then I think the Cavs are probably the only realistic long shot that has any prayer. I'm not buying the Knicks or the Heat or the Raptors, who the market adores every game. Matt, do you have any bets in this market?
Yeah, I've got a pretty well-balanced position on Bucks early, and then added Celtics a little bit through the season. I think right now, you kind of mentioned it, how the vibes around Boston aren't great, and you're right, and that's been kind of coming. Like there was burblings around the league for quite a while about the Jaylen Brown stuff. That like Jaylen Brown's isn't just like, yeah, no, I'll be Tatum's Robin and that's fine. I'll just be the number 2 guy. I just love Boston, but boy, I love the give me some Duncan. I love that's not Jaylen Brown. So like long term, that's concerning. What I do think though is we have this, if you're going to buy low, it's never going to be in a great position of like, oh yeah, they look awesome. They're just of low price, right? If you're going to buy low, you got to buy a little bit lower. Where I kind of get to is if the Sixers had managed to get out of the Celtics range, if the Celtics hadn't lost last night, and they'd been able to catch Milwaukee, I would have probably been eyeing Sixers a little bit. I don't have faith or confidence that the Sixers can beat the Celtics. That they, to me, it's been a historical problem for them. Embiid has real issues with the double teams that Boston's able to throw at them. They have enough offensive firepower to counter. They can switch on Harden. So it's just a bad matchup. If they could have gotten out of that, then it would have looked a little bit different. So I don't think the Sixers can get to the conference final. So we are just really talking about Bucks Celtics. Celtics at a plus number to me is pretty good here. The reason is, as good as Milwaukee has played, and when Milwaukee looks good, they look so awesome, and everyone's like, that's the best team in basketball. The problem is that Milwaukee has a real problem hitting their ceiling in the playoffs. I looked this up last year. Since 2019, since the Bud era, they have the worst mark of actual effective field goal percentage versus their expected. And how that translates is they miss open shots. Like their shooters just choke up a little bit. And when those shots don't go down and you're able to layer the defense versus Giannis, that offense bogs down. Versus Boston, which is very much feast or famine. When their threes aren't hitting, the Celtics look like garbage like last night. But when they're able to actually hit shots, they can outpace Milwaukee. So at a plus number, as much as I think that the Bucks would have beaten the Celtics last year with Chris Middleton, I do kind of think that the Celtics are probably the play here at plus 160 with where the market is at currently.
It's a good breakdown. Shocking to learn that Jaylen Brown doesn't bleed green. I guess, but I think I am going to be patient here. I think the Sixers can get flipped by the Cavs still, even though the Cavs losing last night doesn't help. And if the Sixers are in the 4 seed, my likelihood of them winning the championship goes up significantly because they can beat the Bucks and the Celtics can beat themselves. And I think, I have seen enough times where the champion of a conference takes on different forms, right? Sometimes it's literally like, LeBron, I'm the best player in this conference by margin. I'm going to flip the switch when I feel like it. Sometimes it's like the Warriors last year, where it was like this team, the best unit on that squad played 10 minutes together in the regular season. Didn't matter. They knew each other so well that they could flip the switch and win a week West, right? I don't get the sense that there's a clear standout among this group of 3 at the top, and it is very matchup dependent, as you were alluding to. Like Sixers are live versus the Bucks, dead versus the Celtics. Celtics are live versus the Bucks for sure in a matchup standpoint, but they may have internal problems that keep them out of round 2 because the Raptors might match up pretty well against them in the 2-7, right? So yeah, I think definitely shopping for price is probably the right approach in the East this year, I think. And, the fact that we haven't seen the Celtics play anywhere close to what we saw this time last year, going back to December. I really don't even remember the last time I saw the Celtics give you a full hard perform where you were like, oh man, these guys have it. It's been a really long time. And I think Thursday's game against the Bucks is pretty important for everything we've talked about. Bucks win. Giannis is in the MVP discussion. Celtics win. And I'm like, man, I really wish I had taken plus 160 on Wednesday. Jay, where are you at in the East right now?
I think the issue with Celtics plus 160 is that they're a heavy favorite to have to play Milwaukee on the road in the Eastern Conference Finals. And that's going to be about Bucks minus 125 fair, Celtics plus 125 fair. And obviously the Bucks could lose before that, but that's unlikely. And so if you're just mathing out the series by series prices, if you're factoring in that series is going to happen, then the Celtics need to be like minus 600, minus 700 to get there in the first place for that to even be neutral value. And I think the fact that the Sixers are looming and are still favored for the 3 seed, and that's going to be like Boston, minus 180 fair type, that kind of range. So yeah, you like it more, minus 200, minus 250.
Yeah.
Even so, it's not going to be minus 600. So at that point, I think you're better off just holding off for the time being. And look, the market is very anchored to these top 2 teams, and you're probably just better off backing series by series prices on all of these teams at this point, I think. I like the Cavs. I think I like the Cavs upside, but it's 16-1. If you just multiply their series prices, you're going to get a bigger price than 16-1. So I think that there's no bet for me in this market at the moment. There is, though, in the Western Conference, where the Suns are heavy favorites at plus 225. I don't agree with that because of their path. The Nuggets, no respect for the number 1 seed Denver Nuggets, plus 325. And then the scary looming Warriors 5-1, Warriors plus 550. And then we get into the longer shots. Anything you like in this market, Matt?
This one's fascinating. So I already have positions on the Nuggets at longer numbers, so I'm good on as far as that goes. It is a disrespectful number to them for sure. There's a chance that they face the Lakers in the first round, and I'll just tell you, they would be nervous about that at the top. Their top of their team would probably be a little bit if they have to face the Lakers, even with how much I'm kind of I don't know, guys. I think we're overstating the Lakers here. All year, I have been off of the Grizzlies. 2 years now, I've been off of Memphis. Half-court offense, can't score. They cannot score in the half-court. Cannot get it done. In the playoffs, that's where that shows up. Was on Wolves on the series price last year, on the series line plus 2.5. Made bank on that. Almost got home if the Wolves had not completely messed themselves in that series and cost themselves that series. So, and all this year, I haven't taken a single position on the Grizzlies. And I've heard Drew make the case for the Grizzlies and been like, why? Why is he? What does he likes about? And now, if you look since the All-Star break, since they added Luke Kennard, guess who's top 12 in half-court offense? The Memphis Grizzlies. They've made a real push here. And I kind of been like, maybe it's the Kings. Maybe the Kings get the other side of the bracket and they don't have to go through Denver or Phoenix to make the conference finals. And now I'm kind of like, man, maybe I may have just built this entire hole for myself. And Memphis, over the course of a season, has gone from a team that I could not believe in to a team that has faced adversity. They've had this crisis moment. They've gotten past it. They still have a dynamic superstar. They can defend. They have a third scorer in Desmond Bane. They have depth. They have good coaching. Plus 550 for the Grizzlies. If they're going to be in the other side of the bracket, especially if Golden State winds up in the 4-5, which is still very possible, that to me is probably the best value on the board if I'm betting into the market right now. Even though I think that the Nuggets are definably the best team in the conference, they are the best team with the best home court advantage. That's kind of where I'm at on this. This is a fascinating market and a fascinating race to me.
Yeah, I think
that if you're multiplying out again, you multiply out the series prices for the Nuggets, you're just not getting to plus 325. I think on average, being very conservative, you're looking at minus 300 first round, at worst pick round 2 against Phoenix. And I think they would be favored in that series because of home court. And then minus 200 having, disposed of Phoenix at that point. And that's being very conservative. And that's plus 300. And I think you're probably looking at prices closer to plus 200. I think the Nuggets are extremely underrated. And I think there's an idea that they're going to get worse in the playoffs because of Jokic and his defense. And I go the other way. I think they are the team that benefits most from the playoffs because of shortened rotations. Their starting lineup is the best in the NBA. Their bench is the worst of any good team in the NBA. And the playoffs, you get to play your starters more. And you're going to see less of these minutes with Zeke Naji and Jeff Green and their other guys. So I think that the Nuggets, I still think Jokic, bizarrely, is the most underrated player in the NBA. I think he is as good as anyone in the playoffs and is going to be. And I loved what I saw from him against Milwaukee. Just that level of aggression, just the level of his defense as well, where he's just standing in front of Giannis in the second half, just taking the damage. He's so strong. He's so smart. He's underrated defensively, which has been talked about to death. But I think the Nuggets are the best bet. And I think the Grizzlies as well are a good bet just because of their side of the draw. But what do you think, Drew?
I agree with your point, and you're starting to kind of win me over with the Nuggets. Little by little, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, okay, fair. I just look at their potential first-round matchups and their potential second-round matchup, and I'm just like, this is going to be war. They may be that good, but, it's not going to be easy. And I think the fact that they're going to have to play a lot of basketball, they're not going to have any short series. They're going to have to play a lot of basketball, and they have a lot of guys that they're relying on outside of Jokic who must stay healthy for them to make a run, right? Porter Jr. has a slip up at some point and isn't available. That offense, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, this is how we defend you. Bye. That. There's a very straightforward kind of way to solve the Nuggets if they have any kind of issues with fatigue or injuries at all. So they look fragile to me. But your points are very, very fair. The real thing that I just am starting to get a lot of sense of, and you, as a bettor, you try to avoid biases like pattern recognition and stuff like that. This entire season has been very, very, very similar to the pre-COVID season. That got stopped short and then went into the bubble. And I'm already preparing for the PTSD of a Heat Bucks round one series and a Raptors Celtics series and a Nuggets Lakers series. It feels like it's all coming back to, with some of these kind of wild matchups we had in the bubble. And I'm not believing in the Lakers. But at a minimum, that's a tough out if it's a 1-8. And, I think the Nuggets were more easy to dismiss for me earlier in this week when it looked like it was possible that the Warriors could end up in the 8th seed, right? Because they kind of still, to me, are sort of the lurking, landmine. They're not going to win the West, but they are going to make, life miserable for some team over the balance of a 7-game series at some point. And, if they end up in the 6th, that could be the death knell for the Grizzlies. If they end up in the 4 or 5, it could be a problem for the Suns. If they end up down in the play-in, then I'm now all of a sudden I'm holding plus 320 or plus 300-ish on Nuggets. And that doesn't look great if they're playing the Warriors in round 1. So I don't know. I think it's still so matchup dependent.
Yeah, I think it's someone who lived in Denver the past 3 years, occasionally did the pregame show with Vic Lombardi, was at Ball Arena all the time. I want the Nuggets to play the Lakers in round 1 because I think the Nuggets are going to stomp the Lakers, and I'm excited for it. All right, let's, before we close out with tonight's slate, download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right, Matt, what are the bets on your card for tonight?
All right, let's start with the tough one. I'm backing the Bulls here to get 2 versus the Lakers. I just can't get to the Lakers being a road favorite versus almost anybody. There's anybody that's decent, anybody that's within range of the competition. I think it also kind of underestimates what the Chicago team has been this entire season and then what they've evolved into over the last couple of weeks. So for the season, they're a good defensive team, and no one can really believe it. It's oh, come on, Vucevic and DeMar and Levine. Yes, this team is good defensively. They have really good principles. Turns out Billy Donovan's a really good defensive coach. On top of that, Zach LaVine looks spry for the first time in a long time since his knee history. He took some time off and he has come back with a lot of explosiveness, and that edge I think is significant here with them having a better backcourt, honestly, than the Lakers, even with good old D'Angelo Russell firing up threes. You got Patrick Beverley. Since Beverley came back, they've had this big edge. He has provided the kind of spark that they needed. It's rare that I like teams to win twice in a week versus an opponent, but this is a conversion back to home court. And I just can't get to the Lakers being a favorite here. So for me, this is more about, I do not think that this number should be the Lakers favored. I think this should be way closer to a pick. If not, I've actually got Bulls -1. And so I'll go ahead and I'll take the points with the Chicago Bulls here to get the win, as the Lakers continue to get way too much credit for the idea of what they can be rather than the reality.
Okay. Yep. Well, I'll be the voice of sanity here. The Lakers are a better team than the Bulls. No, I mean, the market told you a lot in the last matchup, which was surprise LeBron's in. It balloons up to 6.5, and then he's coming off the bench, and the Bulls got bet aggressively into the close. But it was still, Lakers -4.5 into the close there. So that there is a gap, and Lakers are the better team in the eyes of the market, and I think they have a decent rest advantage here. Bulls coming home after a really grueling road trip. They looked like they completely ran out of gas in the second half against the Clippers. And this is a tough, quick turnaround. You're going to see LeBron probably coming in as, probably getting starting minutes in this one. I know he's questionable, but I read that as probable. And I think ultimately, his contributions offensively were pretty unimpressive against the Bulls last time out. And I would just marry that to he wasn't on the court with AD as much. And so, his kind of go-to initiating offense via the pick and roll with AD was just not really part of their offense last game. So that could surprise the Bulls to a degree, or it could be very effective against the Bulls. I like that particular, set against, the Chicago defense, which I don't rate top 10, even though every advanced stat in the market says they are top 10. I'm like just fringe outside top 10 defense. And even more though, like the Bulls offense to me is bottom 10. And if you can give the Lakers, a little bit less of, if they have to be a little bit, if they can be more lax defensively and still be effective, then I think that just makes the team overall more competitive. So I think ultimately the Lakers get the win. Not my favorite look on the card, but I laid the 2. So we're on opposite sides here. Jay, you break the tie. I know you like the Bulls.
I do like the Bulls. Don't think you're giving their defense enough credit. I think for whatever reason, it's just working. And I think that just particularly if Caruso is going to go with Beverly, I don't understand how Levine and DeRozan and Vucevic are anchoring a top 5, top 6 defense, but they are. And they've just got arms everywhere. And they just play really hard on defense. And that's half the battle in the regular season. So I'm on the Bulls with you, Matt. Last one for you.
I'm just excited I get to do the best betcast in the rematch after Pat Bev too-smalled LeBron. He too-smalled him. And I think there's almost certainly going to be a little bit of revenge exacting. And obviously that's not bettable. That's not actionable information. But excited to see how this breaks for Mr. Pat Bev.
I'm excited for the Chicago Bulls to too small Drew Dinsick because they're going to cover this game. Last one for you, Matt. The total in Wolves Suns is 235.5. What do you like in this one?
I love the under here. I've actually got it projected all the way down at 225. I got a huge edge on this one. Suns, they are the last team in fast break points per 100 possessions since the All-Star break. They are the last team in fast break points per 100 possessions. I've got a huge disparity in terms of like where the average is on fast break points per game, and especially that gets even worse versus the Wolves, who have a very good transition defense. So they're able to get back and slow you down and make you work in the half court. And the Suns are fine with that because they got Chris Paul and they've got Devin Booker and they're going to have Kevin Durant. The over has hit more consistently in Suns games with Kevin Durant. That makes sense. Kevin Durant's one of the best scorers of all time. However, this Wolves defense, I think, continues to be a little bit underrated by the market. They've got a lot more tricks that they can throw at you. They've got great rim protection, obviously, to be able to contest inside. They rebound very well. And I think that the Wolves will be able to control and dictate the pace in this one and play it the way that they want to. I don't think that they'll win because they have Kevin Durant back and they're at home. But I do like the under here quite a bit. I just think this number is too high in the market. I will take the under in Wolves Suns.
Yep, like that. The Wolves are coming. Would not be shocked if they get the 6th seed if they end up in the Western Conference Finals. Well, they'll probably lose to whoever they play. But I think that team, with their defense and the way they're playing at the moment, has a bit of a run in them. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell people where to follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on HP Basketball on Twitter. Make sure to download the Action Network app. Best way for you to track your picks, all that great information. We got daily shows, all sorts of cool stuff. And you can follow me on Twitter at HP Basketball. Love coming on. Love both you guys' work. I love the show. It's been awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. All right, Drew. Can't believe you're riding with the Lakers. I need the Lakers to win. I'm on the Lakers at like plus 990 to make the playoffs. from when they were 2-13 or whatever. So I desperately need a Lakers win, but I don't believe in this team at all. But hoping that 2013 LeBron James shows up tonight for my sake and your sake. What else is on your card tonight?
You want the two grossest plays on the board? Because I got them. I laid 11 with the Brooklyn Nets. I laid 11 points with the Brooklyn Nets. We've covered it ad nauseum. I don't know what the Houston Rockets are doing right now, but they're not playing professional basketball, particularly not towards the end of games. I think the Nets get a comfortable win there. I laid the 11. And then, oh boy, hold your nose. I took the 11 with the Pistons. Not loving the way that the Thunder look. And honestly, I don't have a read yes or no on whether Shea's going to go. But I do know that the Thunder, if you can in any way, shape, or form make anyone else beat you, then they kind of dry up pretty aggressively. So I'm going with the Pistons to keep that one close. I think it's that should be more like a 10-point game. So I took the 11, and then again laid the 11 with the Nets.
I don't mind the play on the Nets. Seeing what the Rockets served up in the Garden, they're also at the end of a road trip too. That team's an absolute mess. I think my best bet on the board is Knicks -5, just because pretty confident Brunson is going to play. Thibodeau said on Monday after the game against the Rockets that Brunson was expected to play. He practiced on Sunday. He went through warm-ups on Monday. I'm guessing they just held him out because it was against the Rockets and they were 13-point favorites without him. And this is a huge game for the Knicks, where if they beat Miami, they go 4 clear of Miami and the tiebreak. Their magic number for top 6 at that point is 1. So it's done at that point effectively. So this is a big game for them. And I'm also not sure what the situation is with Jimmy Butler, because that was a game they needed to have last night. And Butler's been playing all the back-to-backs leading up to that. So I don't know why he sat. It's very strange to go, to your point, not on injury report, probable, questionable, out in the space of about 4 hours on a national TV game. And Kyle Lowry is out tonight as well, sitting the back-to-back. So that's a problem for the Heat too. So I like the Knicks -5. All right. Don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Thanks for Matt Moore for joining us as well. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe us. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick. We'll see you soon.